Good evening, everybody. Hello. Good to know. My name is Prince Gomovilis. I am the acting director of the Master of Professional Writing program here at USC. For those of you who don't know, the MPW program is the first multi-genre creative writing program in the country. Our students come here to study fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and writing for stage and screen, and we explore the connections between forms. Tonight is a very, very special night. John Robin Baitz happens to be one of my longtime playwriting heroes, so you can imagine how honored I feel to be able to welcome him here today. It's I would do the introduction, but I would just gush for like a half hour. So Dinah Lenny's going to do the introduction. We all have the pleasure of hearing him read from his own work this evening, which is a rare treat, rare opportunity, before having a conversation with Dinah Lenny about his career, about his writing process, about anything you want to talk about, followed by a Q&A with you, the audience. And after that, you could join us right over to the side here for a reception, where Robbie has graciously agreed to sign books if you want your book signed. Before we get started, if you all could take a moment to silence your cell phones and other noise-making devices, that would be greatly appreciated. To introduce John Robin Baitz, I'm going to invite Dinah Lenny up to the podium. Dinah is the author of Bigger Than Life, a Murder, a memoir. Her writing has also appeared in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Agni, Creative Nonfiction, Plowshares, and many other places. She teaches nonfiction here in the MPW program. Please welcome Dinah Lenny.
Thanks, Prince. We have a birthday tonight. It's Karen Tate's birthday. Happy birthday, Karen! Yeah, so yes, here is what, here, it's so funny that you guys are all way over there. I feel like I'm listing in some strange direction. Here's what Frank Rich said about John Robin Baitz in the New York Times review of 3 Hotels. I'm going to just paraphrase the first part of this. He said, what makes Mr. Baitz an exciting writer, his words, he said, not so much his familiar indictment of this and that and the other thing, but the humanity, lacerating wit, and theatricality with which he levels his charge. And also about that play, Ben Brantley wrote recently about Mr. Bates's gift for translating the complicated feelings into theatrical language that both sings and stings. So, here's what Ben Brantley said on Other Desert Cities. He said, built with gleaming dialogue, tantalizing hints of a dangerous mystery, and a structural care that brings to mind the heyday of Lillian Hellman, Cities has the appeal of a Broadway hit from another age, which I thought was really interesting. Robbie, I hope I'm going to have time to ask you how you feel about reviews and if you read them. But let me just tell you that John Robin Baitz has written and directed and acted on stage and on screen, for film and for television. He was twice a finalist for the Pulitzer. His plays include Other Desert Cities, The Paris Letter, 10 Unknowns, 3 Hotels, The Substance of Fire, A Fair Country. I'm not saying them in any kind of order. I'm sure how many plays have you written?
Like 12?
12 plays. So just a staggering amount of work. His TV credits include writing for The West Wing and Alias and creating the ABC drama Brothers and Sisters. He's been nominated for countless awards and won a whole lot of them too, including the Humanitas Prize for 3 Hotels. We're really lucky because Robbie's consented to read for us tonight, and I think you're going to read from 3 Hotels, yes? So I'm going to sit down with you and help me welcome John Robin Baitz. And then we'll sit down together.
Hello.
Is that all right?
Yes, everything's fine. Hi. Let's see, I'm 51, so 12 plays, 13 plays, 4 plays in a drawer. So say 16 plays. It's not that many.
No, it's a lot.
Actually not. I'm going to read a little bit from this introduction to Three Hotels, and at the request of Dinah, I'm going to read a little bit of the play. Context. Well, maybe the context is in here. Yeah. Okay. This is from my little intro. Memory is everything to me. In an earlier play, I have a character say, I live each day only so that I have something to remember tomorrow. Sometimes I think that this is the playwright's life, or this playwright's life. Fallible and dangerous as memory is, I do, however, quite clearly recall the phone ringing in my parents' small, somewhat charmingly cramped Beverly Hills apartment, and me picking up to hear my father say, well, Robbie, they finally did it. They let me go. And then a silent laugh of bitter relief. As it transpired, my father, who had worked for the same company for 30-some years and had risen amicably through the ranks, had been one of several vice presidents who were asked to take an early retirement, quote unquote, that, quote, Black Monday, unquote, as it came to be known in family mythology. When he retired, I think he became someone else. A man in what was only definable as the second act of his life. My mother was relieved that all the traveling, the secret battles for corporate survival, the hours and days lost in a cold sweat of work fear, the failing health, the diminution of spirits, these would all finally end. That is not, I hope, what Three Hotels is about. It simply served as a leaping off point for what I now realize is an ongoing attempt to understand the unknowable nature of two people I've loved and wanted to protect ever since I was a child. Wow, I wrote that a long time ago. And thereby to learn, and I haven't read it in a long time, and thereby to learn something about my own flawed and leaky little psychic bag of tricks. I think what I write about is betrayal. Consider the story of the scorpion who encounters a water buffalo at a riverbank and implores the buffalo to ferry him to the other side. And the water buffalo, reluctant at first, says, you'll sting me, I know you. But the scorpion swears on his life, his good intentions. Of course, halfway across, the buffalo feels the inevitable white-hot stab of the scorpion's sting and asks wonderingly, why? Now you've killed us both. To which the scorpion replies, as they go down for the third time, I can't help it, it's my nature. This to me is maybe the only story there is, and one simply lives to see it proven or disproved. Disproved more often than not, I think, I hope. Three Hotels most assuredly is not a play about my parents, but a rumination on betrayal of oneself, one hopes, and finally it is the fervent prayer that there might be something in this wrecked world to salvage. I wrote it very quickly at a beach hotel, much like the one described in Act 2, a hotel exactly like the kind of place I grew up in transit at. After seeing the play, people sometimes express the desire for an actual scene of dialogue, but at the Hoyle's hotel, there's no talking. There's only a terrible, aching silence. The play consists of 3 monologues. Which can only be bridged by the longing to feel that one is still human, even though there's little evidence left to support that wish. So that's from my intro, which I haven't read since I wrote it in 1994. I'm not sure that I feel that that everything's about betrayal anymore. So should I stay?
Well, you could read. Do you want to do the monologue from the chair? Wherever your monologue.
No, I'll do it here.
Yeah.
I said that with such. I said that the way my shrink leaves messages on the answering machine. Yeah, well, you know, she actually, if you call her outgoing message, there's this thing that says, hi, you know, blah, 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 I can't, da, 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 da. And then there's this brief sigh, and she says, and if you're part of my bipolar disorder group, well, I've spent a lot of time talking about that sigh before bipolar disorder group. This is from part 1, The Halt and the Lame. Let me just see quickly how little to read. And I know exactly how little to read. Da, da, da. Okay. That's a lot of pages. A hotel suite. An air of faded Edwardian quietude hangs heavy in the air. Tangier, Morocco. Kenneth Hoyle stands for a moment in thought. He has on a rather exquisite summer suit. There are manila files, there are papers, old copies of the London Financial Times scattered about this opulent hotel room. The first thing I want to say is this is an interesting market, this little corner of Africa here, and it's been a particularly bloody morning here in Morocco, let me tell you. Because one of the interesting things about this market is we lose more money here than we lose anywhere else in the world, which is saying a lot because we lose money everywhere. So this entire morning has been about cutting away the deadwood, and when I say deadwood, think of a petrified forest. Letting people go, that sort of thing, and gruesome work it is. I mean, to fly in and check into some hotel and tell people it's over is not exactly a joyride. Markets. At World Headquarters in Los Angeles, we have this sort of a war room, and there's a map, a lucite map of the world, upon which our competition appears as a sort of huge orange cancer encroaching. This is the same orange as the drink Fanta, which is popular in my markets. Third world markets. They like us to say developing nations, which is slightly laughable, given how very little development actually occurs. He goes to the drinks tray and takes his time mixing a martini. I sometimes wonder if we could color our product, which is powdered baby supplement, a powdered milk formula, if we could just color our product, orange, like this drink Fanta. A fun color appealing to the natives, we might increase our sales threefold overnight. 5 will get you 10. I say at our meetings in the war room that if this baby formula were bright orange, fizzy and sweet, we'd knock 'em dead in Lagos. Gets a bit of laugh out of Mulcahy and Kroner, who begrudge me not at all my little bits of gallows jokery, so long as I perform for them. Gotta perform. This has come to mean, it appears, that I let people go. This morning today is sort of a red letter day when it comes to unemployment for many. Fraser, Conklin, Truitt, DeWitt, and just now Varney. He takes a long drink from his martini. Varney, who had come up through the international division with me, we started at the same time, 20-some years ago. They handed him this entire market, all of North Africa. They handed it to him, and he blew it. His little thing, little boys, loved the little native boys, but it was not that which stalled his progress through the international division, no. I did warn him. We had dinner last month in Nairobi. I said, Kroner and Mulcahy are going to want to see something soon. A clear, bloody, flat-out warning to this buffoon. And I did it as a favor to him because we came up together. But he kept going on and on about the little sales girls he found. Quote, nut-brown little milkmaid gals, he called them. And implied a number of them were willing. And one just sits there mortified, knowing, wanting to get up and say, hey, pal, nobody gives a fuck if your cock is twisted, just so long as the fourth quarter profits are flyers. That's how we speak at World Headquarters. And you got to learn fast. What's funny to me is that they perceive me as a sort of gentleman farmer tending his little garden. Oh, call Kenneth Hoyle. He'll know how to handle Varney. He's marvelous at that sort of work. I'm good at firing people, is what they're saying. My first year of this particular assignment consisted almost exclusively of getting off of prop planes and doing that sort of work. Because by the time Mulcahy and Kroner finally decided to let me have a shot at it, the orange bits on the lucite map had pretty much occluded our blue. And I was sort of a last-ditch, try anything, what about Hoyle sort of thing. And the result has been a bit of a bloodbath. People who used to want to have a drink, well, they shy away now.
And do I blame them? You can't. Even though I don't make a game of it or take the slightest bit of pleasure out of the task, what sort of person would? But the thing is, you have to do it quickly, because when you linger, it's sheer hell. In less than an hour, the next batch starts trudging in. Less than an hour, next batch, another martini is mixed. Well, this is how it's done. Varney, it's no accident that I'm stopping off here in Tangier. And he looks at me. At first there's this moment of denial, the raw animal response, the instinct, do I run, do I hide? And I'll just sit very quietly, because I want him to understand the thing that is happening and to create an atmosphere of dignity, which is up to them, before I have to utter the unfortunate words, I'm here because we have to make a change. It's much better when the words are not actually spoken. But Varney, he gets it. Like, he's an old hand, and you know when it's over. So we sit quietly, and then he asks me, doesn't it feel odd, Ken? What? I say. And he says, your rise to power, Ken. And then he goes, quietly goes. They go quietly when I do it. And afterwards, when one is alone by oneself, sitting here alone by oneself here in one's room, it's not hard to think about the railroad tracks to the ovens. You do not want to talk about the ovens at world headquarters. One time in the war room, I made one of my little asides. I said, I hope that our baby formula marketing policy in the third world would not be looked upon as some sort of horrifying mercantile final solution. And Kroner looks at me over this huge table we have and says in his Havana-esque accent, well, I hardly see the comparison between baby formula and Zyklon Bigas. Jew? Barks out a laugh, which shuts me up quickly, let me tell you. When I told my wife that story, she said, what I'd like to do is to hang a big dead cow from one of the palm trees. At World Headquarters, we have these two giant palm trees that rise in front of the building, flaking the neon iris and rose sign that lights up Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica. And so sometimes I think, well, why tell her these stories if she's going to be so hypersensitive? But who else is there to discuss this with? I mean, if not your mate, I mean, if not her, then I'll say this. I shocked her last winter in London. Yeah. A young man who, well, let's preface this, a lefty Brit with money. And when I say lefty, you can safely read Stalinist, which I really don't mind. I think it's cute. But not once has any of them apologized for having gotten it so very wrong for so many years, and for having given the rest of the world such a bloody hard time all the while. Not once has any of them had the class to so much as stand up and say, oh dear, oh sorry, we were wrong. I have only one wish, that my father had been around to see Leningrad to revert to St. Petersburg. I would have liked to have handed him that headline. He cuts and lights a cigar. Anyhow, this Brit kid who works for us, we're at a party for the London office. My wife Barbara, a bunch of the guys. And the kid says to me, Mr. Hoyle, sir. And you know they're going to fuck you when they call you sir. I must tell you, I think that what we're doing in Africa is morally indefensible. Well, I mean, there you are. His wife stands there grinning at me like a mad little Staffordshire Terrier. And there's my own wife grinning, thrilling, and Kroner and Mulcahy taking it in too. Morally indefensible, I say. How so? And he sputters like a boiling tuber. You've got saleswomen dressed up as nuns and nurses, for God's sake, running around hospitals in Lagos and Nairobi. You're treating baby formula in the third world as if it's tonic water, which it's not, though by the time the mothers dilute it and the babies drink it, it may as well be. You've got billboards with doctors on them, for Christ's sake, proclaiming Iris and Rose is better than breast milk. And the only reason you're getting away with any of this, Mr. Hoyle, is because you're doing it in a place where white people do not go on holiday. Come on, he says, defend that. At world headquarters, you learn a kind of manufactured thuggishness. It's a sort of currency, if you will, the coin of our realm. It means nothing less than nothing, really. It's totally made up. I look at the boy. For years, I begin. This company was run by uncomplicated men who had a clear goal, make a buck. And with the opening of so many world markets, it's taken these guys a little while to learn that you can't do business in Togo the same way you do in Elbow Lake, Minnesota. I stop for a moment. Because in Togo, pal, things are different. What I'm doing is, I'm doing my gentleman farmer number. Someone said poor George Bush might have seen me on PBS, that documentary on corporate accountability, and stolen my style. Anyway, back to the party. I said, listen, you and I both know that you know that. I can see from your tie you did your hard time at the London School of Economics, so kiddo, clearly you're right. Therefore, I'm not going to stand here and play sandbox ethics with you, so let me offer you this: quit. I take a breath. The room, it is glistening. It is limpid. He's beginning to look queasy, but I'm not about to let this cocksucker off the hook. And this is where I get Mulcahy and Kroner. If it's so very morally indefensible sitting here overlooking Green Park with your glass of stout and sausage on a toothpick, well then this must be your resignation, and happy am I to accept it right here and now, sir. Exactly 18 days later, I was made vice president in charge of marketing and third world affairs. And like that, you know, the reasoned apologia followed by the sucker punch. The boy, incidentally, never quit. Gave him Cairo and Libya. Doing just fine. And silence until Claridge's. Africa. Barbara says it's hardened me. I seem to spend more and more time lately fending off a particular brand of self-satisfied righteousness, mostly from women, who think I will be shamed by a photo of a toddler with a swollen belly. And you know, you just find yourself retreating into a kind of manufactured Zen trance. It does no good to tell them, oh, I've seen swollen bellies. Oh, I've seen it face to face. And so what if Barbara has taken to imitating some of my bromides in a deeply Teutonic accent reminiscent of Henry Kissinger? I get the joke. Because sometimes I do have to apologize for the way in which we do business, but when Barbara has toppled over the edge of bitterness into the realm in which careers are ruined, she'll call me the Albert Speer of baby formula. I know we're in tricky waters when I'm compared to some German or other. You see, I had some of our saleswomen in Africa dressed in sort of nurses' outfits. Pink. An error. A mistake. And there's no winning with Barbara lately. On the phone just now, when I tried to discuss this with her, she says, "You love bloodshed, don't you, Kenneth?" And I said to her, "Barbara, have you ever had to work a day in your life? Have you? Because I don't think you know what it is to be simply afraid, because, Barbara, I am always afraid." And she says nothing. I go on. "My father, a card-carrying member of the party, sending me to communist summer camp in Peekskill, making me sing the Internationale with those lyrics about taking over the world. Barbara," I say, "I have been surrounded all my life by people who have to impose their earnest view of the world, this tidal wave of warm piss crashing down on me. I say, at least, Barbara, in business, there's a tangible measure of reality and achievement." And she says chameleon, lizard. Barbara, I say we're not the Agency for International Development. We're no longer in the Peace Corps. We're not administering to the masses of the bloody halt and the lame. For God's sake, Barbara, it's business. That's my little section.
So, first of all, thank you everybody for coming tonight. And how tempting is it to play all the parts?
Well, I prefer to leave it to people like Ron Rifkin or Richard Dreyfuss or Brian Cox. I think that's what people are coming to see.
But wow. Thank you for turning us on. And Corey, thank you for taking us. But did you start as an actor? How does a person decide to become a playwright? How did this happen for you? Talk about your trajectory a little bit.
I guess I just wasn't the kind of actor who could take orders. I was sort of unmanageable. And so I knew I had to do it myself. I laughed too much at other people's lines, which is not good. You can't, you can't.
Do you mean that you couldn't stay in character, or that you laughed at their lines because the lines weren't written the way they should have been written?
All of the above.
So,
And so I said, well, I'm going to sort of start taking matters into my own hands.
and when was that, Robbie? When did you start writing plays?
That happened probably when I was about 4. I think I was pretty much 21, 22. I hung out only with actors. They were all my friends were actors, and I knew they needed something to say, and so I would start writing things for them to say. And over the years, that just sort of turned into a job.
And did you get any particular training for the job? What's a playwright's education in your view?
It's seeing the future arc of an event's narrative inevitability. It's understanding the mineral nature by which characters interact through ambivalence and inambiguity. And it's looking outward into the world in order to find yourself, rather than looking inward at yourself to find the world. For me, I think it's different for everybody, but I think it requires an element of subversion and spying in order to be a good playwright.
And to train yourself, did you read plays? Did you see everything that you could see? How did you learn how to do it?
I read everything.
You read everything?
I read every play I could. I read every play,
Uh-huh.
sort of. Just read all the plays. And I went to see them when I could. And and I think I tried to find my own location in a sort of, I think, somewhat political paradigm of other plays and the world I was living in.
So when a critic says that this is that Other Desert Cities, for instance, is an old-fashioned play in the sense of that kind of theater, do you agree with him? What is theatricality for you? What constitutes a theatrical situation?
It's different for everybody, but for me, that involves a very, very strong argument with equally strong positions, and passionately defended. And usually it involves both people or all parties being right and all parties being wrong. My pyrotechnics are about the power of language.
and about the incantory effect of a lot of words being spoken at the same time.
So were you ever drawn to write fiction, or, I mean, obviously, I wanted you to read that essay at the top of Three Hotels because I love it, but were you drawn to other genres?
Not until now. Now I'm writing a novel
Are
just
you-
to see if I can sustain a thought for 320 pages.
And is it hard?
Sadly, it's not. No, it's not. It's you know, I think if you live in trying to sort of respect narrative, storytelling, consequences, characters, faith, then I think you can write.
So,
Yeah.
so talk about the difference between, so now you're doing a novel, but you've written for the screen, you've written for television. Talk about the difference between, you're making a face. Talk about the difference between writing a play, a screenplay, a teleplay. How is that different? And what causes you to open something up?
I think they can all be the same, actually.
Uh-huh.
Let's take away the business part of movies and take away the system as it exists and just look at the craft. Well, the craft can be as beautiful and as formal and as adventurous as writing a play. In fact, in some cases, more so. I think that my only experience, I'm an amateur screenwriter. You know, they don't come to me expecting a sort of series of visual effects. But right now I'm adapting an Australian novel called The Slap, which was made into a miniseries in Australia, into a miniseries here. And it's about, I think my impression of writing screenplays or teleplays is that it's about compression.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just technical. I think emotionally it's all the same.
So you think that argument exists in a screen, that argument has the same sort of weight in a screenplay or a teleplay? Because I'm really drawn to that idea that on stage you're watching these two energies at each other.
In a play, I think the words are swords. And I think probably in writing for screen, the picture is the sword.
How does a play start for you? Does it start with an idea, or does it start with an image? Do you see it or hear it before? Where do you begin?
It's a lot of different things. I sort of sometimes see someone on the street and they remind me of what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I think about, I think a lot about what things look like, you know, what the world looks like. And
Ideologically.
Ideologically, yeah, but not, I'm not a prisoner of ideology or anything. I think I look at the world.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's a picture in my head, a painting by someone maybe, by, let's say, for the sake of argument, by Eric Fischl or Goya. And the mood of that impresses something upon me, and I start. I just start. There are playwrights who need to start from an analysis, but I'm not that playwright. I start from a kind of very nascent, inchoate impulse.
So do you know where you're going? Do you have a sense of the point that you want to make, or do you discover it along?
No, I know the when I start, I know where I'm going.
Uh-huh.
With my last play, I knew that what was going to happen was going to be the revelation that the writer's power is deeply, deeply flawed, and that there was no such thing as a reliable narrator, which is, you know, an old story, but I wanted to talk about it from my experience of that.
I wanted to ask you about that. In that, so many of us here have seen the play, right? I don't want to be a spoiler here, but there's this wonderful moment at the end of the play where Brooke, the writer, in deep grief and frustration and anger and all of those things. And it's the stage direction is in the play. She throws the manuscript up and she throws it up in the air and it goes everywhere. And I wondered, was that in the script originally? Did that come out of a workshop?
No, I knew that was...
That had to happen. So because I'm wondering about the collaboration. What does a director bring to a play like this? And how much of that do you incorporate in the draft?
Well, I'm a moron. And so I write this terrible first draft, and it's unbelievably bad. And at a certain point, I mean, I'll just an anecdote, Joe Mantello, who directed Other Desert Cities originally, worked with me on it. And after it opened, we were sort of thrilled because we'd worked very hard on it through many drafts. And just to annoy me one day, he said, "Geez, I read the first draft again. This is a terrible, terrible play." And I was like, yeah, it is. It's really bad. But I think that's what everything is. It's all really bad and dumb. And I know it's the difference between me and people who are afraid to do it is that I know how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just keep going because I have nothing else to do. And my entire identity is sadly structured on whether I finish a play or not. So I would get a lot of help along the way from a couple of people. I need to disappoint people and then salvage it. I need to create a small drama in which the world's going to end and then because I'm so bored with life, that I need to do something to make it interesting. So I write very badly, and then
And then people say, "For shame, Robbie, you can do better than this." And
pretty much.
And who are those people? Are they people like? And I know that you've had a long working relationship with Gordon Davidson and with Joe and with
sort of Joe and Andre Bishop, who runs Lincoln Center, and you don't want to let them down. Oddly enough, I've had the same agent my entire career, and I always feel so guilty that this man is sort of believes in me.
Is that a creative relationship? Your relationship with your agent?
No, it's one of friendship and honor.
Uh-huh.
But there is a component of I don't want to let them down. But I also I'm just pretty interested in getting better. I mean, I feel sort of like that I'm a lucky writer in that I'm now 51, and I think I've written the best play of my life, which is so much better than being 24 and writing the best play of your life, which is a fate I wish on nobody, and it happens all the time. I mean, I'm pretty lazy, and I'm a procrastinator, and I honor procrastination and laziness as the unconscious at work.
These are good things to hear, yes? So just back to this idea of influences and people that you read that so beautifully, Robbie, so that when I say, how often do you want to play all the parts, how do you feel about there? So do you write for actors? Are actors in any way a muse for you?
They used to be, but now it's all in my head now. I mean, I'm now old enough that I could play that part. I wrote it when I was 32, and now I'm 51, so I could play them. But I think it's very bizarre for me. I heard Mike Nichols, and then Wally Shawn used him in Designated Mourner. But that was the sort of voice of it for me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I just want to go back for a second to, you said that you if I have this right, you start with an idea, you're situated in the world politically, and you have an idea, and you want to dramatize that, whether it's the unreliable narrator or whether you're saying something about American politics in Africa or whatever that is. But it seems to me that your work is very grounded in specific and familial relationships as well. And I wondered about how much you're drawing from your own life. How much of the work is autobiographical?
Yeah, it is. A lot of what I've written has been, especially when I was younger, about the kind of weirdness of being an expatriate, or specific to my experience in Africa or other places. But and I've written about families because I've seen so much that mirrors everything larger in family structures. I've seen, the kinds of strange deceptions and prejudices and love and loyalty and disloyalty in family life. The unnecessary secrets, it seems like, once this guy in the Village Voice wrote, I think it was, what's his name, Michael Feingold, that all I do is write plays about families. I can't do anything else. And
He said that about you.
Yeah, and I said, well, to myself, yeah, what, and so? I was extremely confused how that could possibly be construed negatively.
Right.
I get a lot now about other desert cities, oh, is that you? Simply because I made the mistake of having a writer in the play. But it's not very autobiographical at all in terms of who she is. I have two kinds of plays in me, which are sort of like everybody else, so sort of come out of probably a kind of anxiety that I feel about my place in the world, and then I have another kind of play that's sort of protesty and critical, and they're very different.
And I think too that, there are recurring themes in these plays. I've been sort of immersed in your plays for a couple of weeks, but one of the things I think that arises again and again is a question about why we make art in the first place, which seems sort of...
I don't know. I have nothing else to do, and so I think that there is a kind of impulse to make sense of the ineffable or the inexplicable or the intangible, and make it manifest in some way, night after night for me, and enact a kind of drama of sort of primal human emotions that we normally don't talk about in everyday life. And so I'm sort of almost, it's a form of Asperger's or autism or something. I have plays in my head, and I need to make sense of how we become who we are a lot of the time. And I don't want to be very specific, but the play I'm writing right now is about it's the first time I've written a play out of an analysis and trying to prove it, which is that the species is actually changing, and that with each increasing generation, there's something being lost and something being gained. But people are really changing as a species, and I'm trying to write about that generationally. The meaning of morality specifically to different generations. So I think about that all the time, because I think about, I think we were talking at dinner, social media, disconnection, isolation, and
authenticity. And so I have these words in my head, authenticity and isolation. And that's enough for me to write a play from, authenticity and isolation, given American life as I experience it.
Do
now.
those plays, do those words make pictures for you? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I wonder what you think about, because we were talking about this sort of changing nature of the landscape and the way screens have affected us. And I just wonder what you think about the future of theater in this current cultural climate. It seems to me that people are less able to sit in live performances. Do you find that?
No, I just think that there are different ways of doing it, and the way I've done it is just one of many ways, but I teach, and I see young playwrights starting companies with young actors.
Mm-hmm.
And we're using rented spaces to talk about what I consider to be plays about the end of the world, because that seems to me the prevailing subject for writers in their 20s and 30s, the ways in which they've been lied to and betrayed, and all of the promises that were made to them have been almost categorically, cynically broken. So I see young people writing those plays and trying in different ways. And their audience is I can't bear to think about the aging white subscribership. What I call the last audience, because they're the audience whose parents took them to the theater. They're the parents of the last audience. The last audience is in their 60s, 70s. But their parents saw O'Neill and Miller and Tennessee in their original incarnations.
Right.
And the grandchildren of the last audience don't really, for the most part, just generationally have the same relationship, nor should they, to the theater.
And yet you're writing plays in that.
I don't mind it, though. I do what I do, and if it works, I can't think about the institution anymore.
But one of the, it's just an electric moment at the end of Other Desert Cities, when suddenly the audience is complicit, when suddenly the brook breaks
She's
the
not
fourth
telling
wall.
any secrets.
No, I'm not, am I? No, I'm
No.
not spoiling. I'm not a spoiler. Sorry?
We haven't seen
Okay, I'm not spoiling. I would not spoil.
I look to create a kind of moment in plays where you see yourself. I'm so incapable of sort of seeing behavior and saying, this is the other. It's me. It's all me. The worst thing that you see on stage, or the worst thing I write, is something I'm capable of doing.
Uh-huh.
And I want to create a theater where we do feel complicit and recognize our own fallibility and the potential we have for doing terrible, terrible things, or even worse than doing terrible things, ignoring terrible things, accepting terrible things.
Mm-hmm.
But I also like a joke, so,
It's interesting. You said when you were reading the essay in front of Three Hotels that you're not sure that you think you're writing about betrayal so much anymore. And yet when I read that essay, I did think to the characters in Other Desert Cities, and to think, one of the things that was interesting to me was that I thought you'd been true to that cause, that in one way or another, every character in that play has betrayed his or her, truth. And wouldn't you say that's still true?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. But I think that what's happened now is that as you get older, I
I don't think I have an appetite for the indictments that I once did as a
Mhm.
writer.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a kind of
Well, I think it's equal opportunity betraying now. Does that make sense? That there's nobody, no villains, no good guys, just
Yeah.
everybody sort of in the
so
soup.
I mean, I think I always strive to do that, but I think I'm all outraged out.
Uh-huh.
And so now I'm curious about how it happens. That's all. So maybe they are about betrayal, but they're also about, small private acts and bits of kindness,
Absolutely.
And, yeah, it's very confusing.
Prince, how am I doing? Should I
You're doing
open it up?
great.
Yeah. So, Robbie, can I open it up to the audience and we'll
Of
let
course
people
you
ask
can.
you some questions? Do you guys have questions? Stephanie?
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, I have two questions for you. One is if you can tell us about your discipline of writing, like what that looks like on a daily or weekly basis. And also, it's been suggested that it's impossible to make a living as a playwright to us, and I was wondering your opinion on that.
Diane, can you repeat those questions for me?
Yes. The first question was about the discipline and the writing process, the daily sort of discipline of writing. And the second question was about whether or not it's possible to make a living as a playwright. Correct?
Well, just to go, let me do the second one first. It is of course possible to make a living as a playwright. It sort of requires a lot of effort and canniness and some luck. But I think if you're a playwright, you're a playwright. And if that's the thing you want to be, then you can find ways to make a living doing it after you're hazed by the system and produced and have a life in the theater, but you also have to be willing to sacrifice a lot. And there's teaching can be part of it, part of making a living in the theater. So I think that this lie that exists now, and it's a valid lie, that you have to supplement your income as a TV or film writer, and I actually try very hard to justify teaching in an MFA program myself with these young playwrights who are paying an absorbent amount of money for proximity. So yes, I justify it by trying to help people become the best playwright they can be.
But Robbie, you wouldn't say that that means that people should set out to write something commercial, right? Or should they?
I don't know what that would look like even. I mean, if you are built to write commercial plays, then that's what you're built for. If you're built to write small private plays that somehow find an audience in their time, then you're stuck with that. You're stuck with your nature. I would never suggest to someone that they become a writer of boulevard comedies or whatever, mostly because that world doesn't exist anymore, and there are very few people. Look, I've written so many plays. This last play is my first play on Broadway. But I have lived really comfortably in ways of that didn't necessarily need to be supplemented by the movies and shit like that. You can't go into it thinking you're dead and you can't make a living at it, because in fact that actually means that you're accepting that you've been betrayed by the avocation you've committed yourself to. Now then, let's go to the first part. Question about discipline. I have none. I wish I had it, but I believe that laziness is a very powerful passion. As powerful as love and hate, and that it's the subconscious telling you telling you a lot of stories. And for me, I have now reached the point where I accept that it's going to be unpleasant for a number of months, if not a year or so. But I'm making notes, and I force myself to make notes. I force myself to keep a diary. I write fragments and strands. And then one day, my self-disgust just reaches a point where I can't bear it anymore. And I'll sit and write a play really quickly. And also, it's a moment when I'm really lonely, too, where I just can't stand the thought of one more day being by myself, and I long to be with actors and a director. But when I teach it, I encourage people to finish a play in, say, 12 weeks, the 12 weeks of a semester. Because when I was in my 20s, that's what I did. And I wouldn't encourage anybody to prevaricate the way I do. But I wouldn't lie about, I don't know what it means to write every day. I don't know what that means. I don't live to write. I find it as I grasp in the world, So yeah. Sorry.
Somebody else? Yes, Valerie.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi.
Oh my God.
I know.
She's my friend from forever. And a good writer.
I'm here. So, when you said that you're all outraged out, and that in that time of being outraged out, that you've written the best that you've written, do you think, and looking at kind of all of these apocalyptic end-of-the-world outraged plays that people in their 20s and 30s
Of which you actually wrote one at UCSB in my
with
class.
cyborgs. Yeah. Do you think that outrage is something that, for this 20s and 30s set, looking at the end of the world, is outrage something that's helping us?
Totally.
It is?
Oh God, yeah.
Did everyone hear that question? Is outrage something that's helping us? Is outrage necessary to the writing? Yes?
Yeah.
You have every reason to be outraged. You've been betrayed left, right, and center. There's I would be fueled by it. It would be my subject. It would be the way Thatcher's England was a subject for an entire generation of English playwrights. The lie of the American century bullshitting young people into anonymity almost is I think the great subject now. The great subject now I think is falsity, the true falsity by which the social contracts propel people into a life of quiet despair. Yeah, I think that what happens though is that I can't afford the rage I once had. It's something else now. It's something that's steeped in irony for me now. I think that outrage is an essential component of being a younger playwright. I've looked at Edward Albee's plays as he's gotten older, and that outrage is unabated, but it becomes, if it's not seasoned in some way, it simply becomes a kind of really, really loud white noise. And to me, the experience of getting older is sort of about forgiving and accepting the actual conditions on the ground and being confused by them. You know, confusion is a lot of what it means to be not just a young writer, but an older writer too. For being absolutely gobsmacked and perplexed. Yeah. Sure.
Are you saying that you write from that place, from a place of confusion?
How would you write about Israel right now?
Ugh, from a place of confusion.
How would you write about the levels of impossibility there? I can't. The levels of inextricable tragedy.
Mhm.
You know, so yes, confusion.
Mhm.
And anger, and sadness, and but I proceed out of a fog, what I now call the fog of war, the war being everyday living.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Somebody else? Yes.
Really enjoyed the mention of Morocco, Tangier.
I'm sorry, what?
I really enjoyed the mention of Morocco and Tangier. I wanted to know how long did you live there, and will you maybe write about it in the future again?
I spent years writing about and living in South Africa in the 70s. And I don't know what I can do anymore. It's a, you know, very much a sort of situation for me of being young in Africa. And I learned about complicity by being a white kid in apartheid South Africa, even though I was an American there, not by choice, though I suppose no child is there by choice. And that was something I grappled with for a good 15 years as a writer, and finally I felt like I no longer had permission to write about Africa because I hadn't spent enough time there in the intervening years. Though I did go back to watch the Truth and Reconciliation hearings, but this is all South Africa, Southern Africa, and I learned that theater is a huge part of politics by watching that. I don't know that I'll ever do Africa again. It's not my right, unless I go back and discover it again. And I now hate travel, so I don't think I'm gonna go.
But Robbie, do you think that plays should be political? Do you think that they should have political, should theater be a political tool?
Yes, but I think the meaning of it for me is not polemics or you know, Brechtian agitprop. It's just that there's no way that the Cherry Orchard is not an enormously political play.
Right.
I'd like to think that American playwrights, as we mature in our discontent, can find ways to write about the American experience on a very, very personal, at a very personal level. I mean, you know, I think of Top Dog, Underdog as a play that does that in a way that's really compelling to me. And so yeah, I think theater should be perceived as a political act. But I don't think it should be perceived as an act in which you tell other people what they should be at all. That's loathsome to me. Yeah.
Do we have other questions? Laurel?
Hello.
Just thinking, saw Desert Cities the other night, but thinking of the audience reaction
depending on where.
Depending on where, because
I don't know, because, you know, I've only seen it in New York, and now I've seen it here for a couple nights.
So that was just for everybody, that was a question about the audience reaction in different cities to this play.
I guess there's a kind of proprietary thing I'm noticing here that's kind of nice. The sort of recognition of, oh, our place is being slightly mythologized in some way. How lovely. Pride.
I don't see Sonia here, but one of the students, I know is she here?
I think her son is sick.
Oh, so she had a question the other night about how you feel, and I was hoping she'd ask it. How do you feel when an actor gets it wrong?
Oh, I couldn't care less. It's just not my first rodeo. You know, it's just another night. I mean, last night, there's a line in my play where it goes, the father, the patriarch, says to his daughter, "You seem to forget I've lost a child, and I can't help but be overly I can't help but be overly protective of my remaining two." And what Bob Foxworth said was, you seem to forget that I've lost a child, and I don't know, and I can no longer care about my remaining two.
Okay, getting a line wrong is one thing, but what if somebody's miscast? Has that happened to you, or have you not suffered through that?
Well, in a first production, if they're miscast, you have this terrible thing where you go upstairs with them and you say, "I think we've made a terrible mistake. I think you're a really great actor. I think it's not going to happen in a way that I can risk. And I hope we work together again, and I hate doing this as much as you hate having it done to you. And you're going to have a shitty time for the next few weeks. And whatever you think is true is true. But as long as you think that it isn't you, it's me, you're right." So that's what you do. And if your impulse is to make a change, you do it. You don't wait.
I see.
You have to really listen to that. I've never had that in a first production happen. And, you know, you're so careful about that. If you can't cast it, you don't do it. And I've canceled productions because of that. You know, if you cast Hardy instead of Laurel, everything's going to go wrong. The wrong man will trip.
So we have time for one more question.
There isn't one. They're
Yes,
done.
there is. Sharif.
What do you feel makes for the stronger narrative when dealing with politics, using perhaps the humanity of the characters to drive a prescription of politics, or perhaps using the humanity of the characters to create a description of the effects of the politics?
Did everybody get that?
No.
So Sharif, you said to write about politics, do you use the humanity of the characters to
make it
Prescriptive
or
so descriptive or prescriptive is what you're asking?
yeah, and what makes for a stronger impact?
Oh,
What happened to you today? Let me ask you a question. Just tell me about your day.
I essentially woke up, Netflixed Avatar for about an hour and a half, went to the grocery store, bought Drano.
And what were you feeling? What were you feeling all day?
Kind of malaise throughout the most part.
And what do you think that was about?
Lack of sleep for the most part. I've been going to bed at like 6 in the morning.
Because you're writing and working?
Because I'm just an insomniac. I don't know. I've
See, that's real life, you know, and that's all I care about. And so that which is prescriptive is to me like a poisoned toad. I just find it
condescending, patriarchal, blah. You know, I can't have Arthur Miller standing over me saying attention must be paid in life, even though I do love that play. I can't be told about, I can't be ordered around. Character is fake. And I'm much more interested in the underlying world of why Sharif can't sleep, and what that's really about, and why he ordered Avatar. And is his taste going to get better?
Oh, that's a perfect place to end. Oh, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to John Robin Baitz for talking to me. Thank you so much. That was perfect.
Thanks for coming tonight, everybody. I'd also like to thank the MPW staff who helped organize this event, Howard Ho and Court Brinkeroff. Let's give them a big hand. Thank you, Corey, for coming tonight. Thanks so much for reception.
Reception time.
There's a reception.